Good day, friends. Today we are in the book of Philippians, and for the next 5 devotional sessions, we'll just spend time from chapter 1 to chapter 4. And my aim today is just to give us lenses in which we can read this book through. There's themes in Philippians, probably 5 themes or even more. But the theme I'm going to focus on is just how Paul is recognizing God is at work. And that's the lens I believe we need to read the book, actually the whole Bible through, but the book of Philippians through. And that's the basis on which we can build all the other themes on, the fact that God is at work. So I want to lay the foundation on which we can build rejoicing and a thankfulness and having this mindset Paul is urging us to have. Chapter 1, today's chapter, we're going to focus on the 4 big paragraphs. So the first one is greetings and the introduction. Paul is saying, grace to you and peace from God. Paul is acknowledging that only peace comes from God. It's actually interesting how Paul, Mosby letter starts off by saying, peace from God, knowing that this letter will bring them peace and will give them peace. And by the end of the letter, he says, peace be with you, because in this letter they will get peace, and at the end of the letter they have peace, and that peace will stay with them. Isn't that just amazing how Paul just recognized God in that? The prayer section, Paul is praying with them, and he starts by praying and thanking God for their relationship between him and the Ephesians. Isn't that amazing? Why doesn't he thank them directly? But he thanks God for them, just putting God at the center of this. Why do you guys think that's the way he does it? Because in Acts 16 we see God opening up Lydia's heart and her eyes to the gospel Paul was preaching, and that's where the book of Philippians started. That's where the relationship with the Philippians started. God had worked in Lydia. Isn't that amazing? We see Paul says he's sure that the good work that God has started in them, he will bring to completion. I've underlined it there. You can see that. That's the insurance that we cannot describe. The work God has started in you, he will bring to completion. Isn't that amazing to have that insurance? Paul prays for them for love, that they may be filled with fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ to the glory and the ultimate prize of God. Isn't that just amazing as well? Advancing the gospel. And this is a section I'm going to focus on a little bit at the end. Is Paul sees his imprisonment as an advancement of the gospel. And this imprisonment causes confidence and boldness. Isn't that a bit funny? His imprisonment, his suffering, causes boldness and confidence. But let's get there. Christ is honored even in the living or in the dying of Paul. That's what he's saying. In this last chapter we see the self-denial there's rewards at the end that he'll gain Christ. He even gain Christ now, but at the end there's rewards by being raised up with Christ. You see, Paul was struggling between, is it better for him to go or to stay? But Paul knew, because we see later, Paul says, it's better for me to stay. His staying results in 3 things. For their joy and their growth in faith. You see, him staying resulted in his own fruitful labor, which equals rewards for him one day. And we see him staying, it glorifies God. God gets the glory. And then he says, live in a manner which is worthy to the gospel. Being a heavenly citizenship, live in a way which is worthy of being a heavenly citizenship. And lastly, and it says your salvation that comes from God. Paul knew that the salvation comes from God. God's the one who starts the work in us. We read it in Ephesians 2 from verse 8 to verse 10. We read it in 1 Peter verse 3, chapter 3, verse 18. And my main point is going to be the section where, why is Paul using his imprisonment as a advertise? He's advertising the fact that he's in prison. In those days, being in prison was shame. People were looking down at you if you were in prison. And the Philippians stayed with him, but he boasted in the fact that he's in prison, and our God is at work even in the fact that he's in prison and he is suffering. Why do you think Paul advertised the fact that he is suffering and he's in prison? You see in 2 Corinthians 2 verse 17, we see that Paul says, I'm not a peddler of God's word. I'm not wanting to sell something to make money out of God's word. He gives it as it is. You see, Paul later on in Philippians also says that he may share in his suffering, that he may know Christ, know the power of the resurrection, and share in his suffering, and to be like Christ. Paul knew that Paul didn't want to sugarcoat something to bring people to Christ, but he gave it as it is, trusting the Holy Spirit, trusting the plan of God for them, and the plan of God for their lives. Isn't that amazing to have that assurance and that confidence in saying that it is, not trying to sugarcoat and worrying, is the Holy Spirit at work? Is the Holy Spirit going to finish this what I've started? No. The Holy Spirit, trust the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit will do the work. We need to bring it as God puts it on our hearts. Don't try and sell something which is not there. Don't try and sugarcoat Christ, but give him as it is. So we read in Mark 13 verse 9. We read it in Luke 21. We read it in Romans 5 verse 3. We read it in James 1 verse 2. And my question for us today, by ending off, is, are we seeing God at work in our lives? Even if it's difficult, like Paul did it here. Seeing his suffering and his imprisonment as advancement of the gospel. Are we seeing it like that today? Or are we getting crossed and questioning and grumbling because things aren't going our way? And that's the question I want us to pray about and dig into as we go through Philippians. That this book is all about joy and our God is at work. Maybe pray about it. Are we trusting God and seeing God even in difficult times? Or are we just following God for what he can do for us? And that's something only us ourselves we can answer. I pray really God's peace for you guys during this day, and dig into your heart and really ask those questions and pray to God, because there's no condemnation for those who believe in him and those who come to him. May peace be with you guys. Amen.